Ethics in marketing are issues that fall under the marketing mix. The 5 P's of marketing each have ethical issues. For product issues, safety, quality, negligence. For price issues, price fixing, monopoly pricing, price gouging. For promotion, digital marketing, false advertising, underplays, distribution, and unethical sourcing. And for people, labor rights and consumer rights. We will discuss issues that fall under product and price. Issues under promotion will be reserved for the next video lesson. The simple situation in which two parties freely agree to an exchange is ethically legitimate, as long as agreements resulted from an informed and voluntary consent with no fraud, deception, or coercion involved. If these conditions are violated, mutual benefit is not attained and autonomy is not respected. However, even when such conditions are met, other values may override the freedom of individuals to enter into a mutually beneficial contract. Thus, for example, the freedom of drug dealers to pursue mutually agreeable ends with drug buyers is overridden by society's concern to maintain law and order. There are 3 concerns in mind when we approach any ethical issue in marketing. To what degree does the transaction provide actual as opposed to merely apparent benefits to all parties? To what degree are market participants respected as free and autonomous agents rather than being treated simply as means to the end of making a sale? And what other values might be at stake in the transaction? The first ethical concern looks to the alleged benefits obtained through market exchanges. The assumption is that consumers benefit whenever they get what they want in an exchange. But there are many purchases that do not result in actual benefit, like when consumers buy junk food and cigarettes. The second ethical concern is consumer autonomy. We consider how free is free to choose. Example, a consumer facing a life-threatening illness may choose to take medical opioids prescribed by a physician, may not really have freedom of choice. The third set of factors that must be considered are values other than those served by the exchange itself. These are social values as fairness, justice, health, and safety. An adequate ethical analysis of marketing must ask who else might be affected by the transaction, what social goods are promoted, and what are threatened when marketing a product. There are 2 important concepts to understand the ethical responsibility of products: caveat emptor and negligence. Caveat emptor is Latin for let the buyer beware. It is the principle that the buyer alone is responsible for checking the quality and suitability of goods before a purchase is made. If a seller explicitly warns that a product may be unsafe, buyers are liable for any harms they suffer. Caveat emptor assumes that consumers adequately understand and judge products so that they can reasonably be expected to protect themselves. Note, this does not remove any seller responsibility, because the law is in the side of the consumer, because it assumes that by bringing goods and services to the market, producers are implicitly promising that their products are safe under normal use. This is without controversy, as manufacturers easily escape accountability by expressly having warranties that limit or deny any claims for damages. Expressed warranties could shelter manufacturers from legal responsibility for their products, because consumers can only recover damages as outlined by the producer. Also, often such limitations are explained in small print at the bottom of a sale agreement and using language that only lawyers can understand. Negligence can be characterized as a failure to exercise reasonable care or ordinary vigilance that results in injury to another person. Negligence is based on a legal concept known as torts. A tort is an act or omission that gives rise to injury or harm to another and amounts to a civil wrong for which courts impose liability. The ethical perspective that underlies tort law holds that we all owe other people certain general duties even if we have not explicitly and voluntarily assumed them. Thus, we all owe other people a general duty not to put them at unnecessary and avoidable risk. Example, although I have never explicitly promised to anyone that I will drive carefully, I have an ethical duty not to drive carelessly and recklessly. Negligence involves the ability to foresee the consequences of our acts and failing to take steps to avoid the likely harmful consequences. The concept of negligence wants to encourage people to be thoughtful and hold them liable when they are not. A preferable stand would be reasonable foreseeability, which would require people to avoid harms that even if they haven't actually thought about, they should have thought about had they been reasonable. Consider the case in 1992 of a 70-year-old woman who was severely burned when a cup of coffee she had just purchased at McDonald's spilled on her lap. She apparently held the cup between her legs and tried to pry off the lid as she drove away. The coffee was hot enough, 185 degrees, to cause third-degree burns, which required tremendous medical care. A jury held McDonald's liable for damages and awarded this woman $2.86 million in damages. Should McDonald's be held liable for these injuries? Were they negligent in serving such hot coffee at a drive-thru window? Was it the fault of the customer? Presumably, McDonald's did not actually think that their customers would be severely burned by coffee, but they should have thought about what people who are driving cars might do to hold their cups when they drove away from the window when served coffee. McDonald's surely could have foreseen the likelihood of spills. The fact that McDonald's had received over 700 prior burn claims about their coffee suggests that a reasonable person would have concluded that this was a dangerous practice. Strict product liability, on the other hand, focuses not on the actions of people involved, but rather on the performance of the product itself. According to philosopher John McCall, strict product liability standard assigns responsibility to producers. So, who is responsible to the social harms of obesity and opioid abuse? It is the sellers. On McCall's view, holding the business that markets unhealthy foods and opioids are accountable offers a fair distribution of cost, because not only do the businesses in these markets profit substantially from these products, they are also best positioned to pass on the cost of paying for damages to all consumers who use their products. This enlightens what producers owe to consumers. What duties do producers owe to consumers? Two things. Producers owe those things promised to consumers in the sales agreement. Producers owe compensation to consumers for any harm caused by their products. A fair price is a price that both parties to an exchange agree upon. But many times, consumers are placed at a disadvantage as businesses can impose their will in pricing their products. Three common issues in ethical pricing are price gouging, monopolistic pricing, Price fixing. Price gouging occurs when the buyer has few purchase options for a needed product and the seller uses a situation to raise prices significantly. A local store that doubles the price of basic food items, batteries, and medicine after a typhoon is an example of this unfair pricing. The goal of monopoly pricing is to maximize profit. The monopoly wants to set the highest price possible and still be able to sell all goods manufactured because consumers have no choice. Price fixing are similar unethical practices. In this case, either individual companies or a group of conspiring companies use their market power to force consumers to pay a higher price than they would have if there were real competition in the market. Microsoft Windows, gasoline, airline travel, and credit cards have all been alleged to be guilty of price fixing. This price collusion is also called a cartel. There are two factors that must be considered when judging whether a price is fair to consumers: consumer freedom and available competition. The greater freedom a consumer has to walk away from a product, the less likely that the seller can set an unfair price. The greater the competition within a market, the less likely that an unfair pricing can occur. A company must have ethical marketing policies to guide pricing, advertising, research, and competitive strategies. Ethical marketing decisions and efforts should meet and suit the needs of all transacting parties. Unethical behavior and deceptive marketing will negatively impact a company's relationship with consumers and society.